Hi everyone, this is a PowerPoint presenting literary terms and figurative language for 7th grade English class by me, Ashley Rapanis. First of all, here are the figurative language aspects we will touch on today. First, we'll talk about similes, next metaphors, then hyperbolas, then personification, then idioms, then alliteration. The first one we will discuss is a simile. Now, I am sure many of you have heard of a simile before, and you may use them every day and just not realize it. A simile is when you compare two things using like or as. For example, as quick as a lightning bolt or as smooth as silk. Another example would be as red as a tomato. A metaphor is another term I'm sure you have heard of before. A metaphor is an implied comparison without using like or as. For example, life is a roller coaster or she is the apple of my eye. Notice in these comparisons, we don't use like or as to compare the two objects. Next is something known as a hyperbola, which is an exaggerating statement. Examples of hyperbolas are, I am so hungry I could eat a cow, or I am so hot I could melt. Another example would be, I'm so mad I could burst. The next form of figurative language we will talk about is personification. Personification is giving something non-human human qualities. For example, the leaves danced in the wind, or the sun smiled down on me. Another example would be the wind whistled to me. In these cases, the leaves, the sun, and the wind are not actually dancing, smiling, or whistling, but with this personification, other people can understand and see the language that we are trying to portray. An idiom is another example of figurative language. An idiom is an everyday saying that doesn't exactly mean what the words say. For example, it's raining cats and dogs, or the boys are getting out of hand. With the idiom, it's raining cats and dogs, we don't literally mean that cats and dogs are falling out of the sky. We just mean that it's raining a lot. Now we will talk about alliteration. Alliteration is when two words begin with the same letter or sound. For example, dressy daffodils or laughing lions. Another example would be crazy cats. Now we'll talk about literary terms. The first literary term we're going to talk about is the climax. The climax is the high point or turning point in the book. Usually it's the most intense and the most exciting part of a book. The conflict is the major problem in the book. The conflict is the problem in the story which triggers the action. The next literary term we're going to talk about is the plot. The plot is the sequence of events. Many of you may know of the plot as the storyline. Foreshadowing is another literary term. Foreshadowing is when something that happened earlier in the book is relating to something that is happening later in the book. Irony is the next literary term we will talk about. Irony is what happens as opposite as what is expected. For example, in a book, if it led you to believe that a prince is dead and then the prince comes back to save the princess, that would be an example of irony. The next literary term I'm going to discuss is resolution. The resolution is the part of the story that comes after the climax. It is usually the end of the story, and it can be happy or sad, or it can leave people to interpret their own ending. Now we will talk about the protagonist and the antagonist. The protagonist is the main character or the hero in the story. For example, superheroes in many children's books are known as the protagonist. The antagonist is the bad guy, or the guy going against the superhero. Time for a quiz. Quick as a lightning bolt is an example of which figurative language element? A. Metaphor, B. Simile, C. Idiom, or D. Personification? The answer is B. Simile because we are using like or as to compare two objects. The next question is, the mittens snuggled up in the girl's hands. Which type of figurative language is used in the previous sentence? A. Idiom, B. Personification, C. Simile, or D. Metaphor. The answer is B, personification, because we are giving the mittens which are non-human, human-like qualities. Many of you may be asking yourselves why literary terms and figurative language are so important. They are so important because they make language interesting and they can help students to become better writers. Thanks for listening today.